"We do not need old men like you holding us back," she said, flicking her hair as if dismissing me was simply a routine. "My name is Steve Reed. I am 59 years old and have been the operations manager at Harris Machinery in Indianapolis, Indiana for the past 18 years. I am not the type of man who gives speeches or seeks attention in meetings, just the steady hand that keeps the wheels turning at a company supplying industrial equipment to half the factories in the Midwest." I simply smiled with sarcasm, nodded once, and walked out of Vanessa's office. No arguments, no threats, no drama. I just methodically cleared my desk while the younger staff avoided eye contact. Many of them had been hired as teenagers, now grown men and women with families, whom I had trained one by one, yet no one spoke as I packed nearly 2 decades of my life into a cardboard box. Charles, kept as is, fits both older and modern use. Harper had built the company with his own hands 43 years ago. He started with a single lathe in his garage and transformed it into a $30 million business through sheer determination and a solid reputation for dependable machinery. He had personally selected me to manage operations when his health began to decline. "You're the only one I trust not to cut corners," he told me. Now, his daughter Vanessa, 28 years old, with a business degree and 2 years spent living in Miami, decided the company required modernization and new viewpoints, a euphemism for removing anyone who remembered how things had been done before. Spreadsheets took the place of common sense as I walked to my truck carrying that miserable box of personal belongings. I felt an unusual sense of calm because Vanessa did not know, nor had she even bothered to verify, that my employment contract contained a very specific clause. It was something Charles himself had insisted on to prevent me from being lured away by competitors. The clause imposed a severance penalty equal to 2 full years of salary if I was dismissed without cause. I placed the box on the passenger seat and sat there quietly for a moment, my hands resting on the steering wheel. Through the windshield, I could see the production floor, the machines I had maintained personally, the systems I had installed, and the team I had assembled, all about to witness what happens when institutional knowledge walks right out the door. I did not slam the door or speed off aggressively. Instead, I turned the key, shifted the truck into drive, and headed home to call Harold Preston, a lawyer friend who had been waiting for a chance to handle a corporate case. This one was as clear-cut as they come. I was never one for showiness. I had been married for 29 years to my wife Linda before cancer took her 4 years ago. I raised 2 children who were both thriving. My son worked for an engineering firm in Denver, while my daughter was a 3rd-grade teacher in Cleveland. My life had always centered on steadiness and dependability, the same values I had brought to Harris Machinery. Charles Harris had been more than an employer. In many ways, he was like the father I never truly had. My real dad had vanished when I was 11, leaving behind nothing. My mother raised 3 boys on a secretary's paycheck. Charles, kept as is, fits both older and modern use, had taken a chance on me when I was 41, coming out of a layoff from a failing automotive factory with nothing but practical experience and a community college certificate in mechanical engineering. "Credentials do not build machines," Charles had told me during the interview. "Men with wisdom and skill do." Within 2 years, he promoted me to operations manager. Charles and I were not the kind to go fishing or hang out at the bar after work. Yet there was a deep respect between us that extended beyond the office. When Linda, common modern name Kept, fell ill, he was the one who rearranged my schedule without a word from me, making sure I could take her to every single treatment. Family always came first. Steve was always the first sign. The initial warning appeared about 1 year ago when Vanessa, kept as his modern name, started turning up at meetings, fresh from business school. She carried a leather portfolio and trailed expensive perfume while spouting words like synergy and market disruption. Often I would notice Charles wincing at her ideas and plans, proposals that would have slashed our quality control or outsourced parts we had always made internally. Yet he never openly challenged her in public. He simply fixed things quietly afterward. "She needs to learn, Steve," he told me one afternoon, leaning against my office doorway. "Some lessons can't be found in books." The next warning came 3 months ago when Charles announced his retirement. He said it was due to heart problems, although I suspected the truth lay deeper, maybe him giving in to something beyond his control. Under Vanessa's insistence, he appeared completely defeated, When he handed me the revised organization chart, which placed Vanessa's name at the very top, I made him promise to maintain the core team. He said, "Not entirely." Meeting my gaze, he added, "The experience you all bring is what keeps this place running." I only nodded, though a tight feeling grew in my stomach. Charles would not meet my eyes, as if aware of what was about to unfold, but unable to voice it. The morning after I was let go, I sat at my kitchen table going over my employment agreement with Harold Preston when my phone lit up, showing Charles's name. I nearly did not answer, but almost 20 years of respect could not disappear overnight. Steve's voice sounded strained as he demanded, "What on earth happened yesterday?" I replied calmly, "Ask your daughter." He paused, searching for words, then said she believed I was resisting the new strategy and undermining her authority with the floor team. I said nothing, letting the silence grow between us. Charles knew me too well to believe I would ever undercut anyone. "Are you going to file a complaint?" he finally asked. "Already have," I answered. "Harold Preston is handling everything." Charles exhaled deeply. "I told her to review the contracts. I warned her before I left that there were safeguards in place." Another pause followed before he added, "She cleaned house yesterday. You, Thomas, Jennifer, anyone over 50. My jaw clenched. Thomas had been our head of engineering. For more than 12 years, Jennifer managed the quality control laboratory as if it belonged solely to her. Both essential in their unique ways. Is this really the leadership you envisioned? Charles was removing everyone who helped establish the company alongside you. You realize it is not him? The voice sounded exhausted, but I entrusted her with authority. Now the laboratory is under her management. I overheard voices in the background on his side, one clearly belonging to Vanessa, sharp and insistent. "I must go," Charles said abruptly. The call ended suddenly. I placed the phone down and looked at my contract spread out on the table. Section 12, paragraph 3, states that if termination occurs without documented cause as described in Appendix C, the employee is entitled to severance pay equal to 24 months of current income. Harold Preston had marked it in yellow. It is foolproof. He had told me earlier, either they will pay willingly or we will file a lawsuit, which we will win, and they will cover my legal expenses as well. I walked over to the window overlooking my backyard. The maple tree Linda and I had planted when we moved here 26 years ago now stood tall over the yard. We had nurtured it through 2 lightning strikes and an illness that nearly destroyed it. We had repaired it, supported it, provided what it required to flourish. Something inside me changed. This was no longer just about money. It was about worth, about acknowledging what experience contributes, about honoring the groundwork others laid before renovation began. I grabbed my phone and called Thomas. By midday, I had already spoken with Jennifer and every longtime employee Vanessa approached. Some were stunned and others angry, all of them frightened about what lay ahead. I told each person to take a deep breath and review their contracts carefully. Then, I instructed them to contact Harold Preston. After that, I made another call to Douglas Clean, owner of Precision Parts across town, a man who had attempted for years to recruit me away from Harris. Still interested in that offer, I requested a meeting 3 days after being dismissed. I found myself sitting across from Vanessa and Harris Machinery's corporate lawyer in a downtown office, with Harold Preston sitting next to me. His worn briefcase was open, and my contract was clearly visible. Vanessa said without even glancing at the contract, "This is ridiculous. We are just moving in a new direction, and that should be enough." Harold, 67 years old and calm, like someone familiar with every corporate maneuver, pointed to the highlighted part that stated, "Termination without cause requires severance equal to 2 years' salary," which was about $320,000 in Mr. Reed's case. The corporate lawyer, a young man named Justin, who looked fresh from law school, reviewed the contract with a growing uneasy expression. He said, "Miss Harris, the term cause is clearly detailed here and covers failure in job performance, ethical breaches, or criminal behavior." I resisted the change, but Vanessa interrupted, folding her arms. "That is insubordination. Where is the proof?" Harold asked for written warnings or performance improvement plans, since Appendix C demands documented evidence. The pattern was clear, not a single example to support Justin. He flipped through a thin folder before him, but found nothing. Vanessa's expression tightened slightly. "So, We pay him a few months' severance and move forward with 24 months, Harold corrected, reminding them that was what the contract specified. That's absurd, she snapped sharply. We will offer 6 months. Take it or leave it. I stayed quiet, observing her closely. In that moment, she reminded me of her father, sharing the same stubborn set to her jaw. But while Charles's stubbornness had always been about creating something, hers seemed focused on destroying. Harold closed his briefcase. Then we proceed with legal action. Discovery should be fascinating, especially with the simultaneous termination of several employees over 50. Justin's eyes widened slightly. He leaned closer to Vanessa and whispered urgently, but she shrugged him off. Before you start making threats, Vanessa said directly to me, ignoring Harold altogether. You should know we are ready to fight this. You'll be tied up in court for years. I finally broke my silence. I have time, and we will make it known throughout the industry that you are difficult. She added coldly, good luck finding another position at your age. That was when her father appeared in the doorway. I hadn't seen Charles since his retirement party. He looked thinner and paler, but his eyes remained as sharp as ever. Vanessa, he said quietly. We are in the middle of something, Dad, she responded, not as a request, but a statement. They stepped outside. Through the glass wall of the conference room, I could see them arguing, Charles gesturing passionately. Vanessa's attitude became noticeably more defensive when they came back. She refused to meet my gaze, Justin. Charles instructed to prepare the severance agreement exactly as outlined in the contract, Dad. Vanessa interjected, not now. Charles then turned to me and said, I apologize, Steve. This is not how I wanted things to conclude. I gave a single nod. There was nothing further to add between us as Harold Preston and I rose to depart. Vanessa positioned herself directly before me and declared, This is far from over. I will be examining all vendor partnerships, and any company that hires you should forget about dealing with Harris. Charles winced at her words, but remained silent. I simply nodded once again, my mind drifting to the conversation I had shared with Douglas Klein the previous day regarding his partnership proposal and the untapped niche market Harris had overlooked for years, which Precision Parts was ready to enter. I told her, You are correct in one aspect. This is not yet finished. The severance payment appeared in my account 7 days later. $320,000 before taxes. It was more money than I had ever seen all at once. I might have expected to feel justified, yet I only felt empty. Money was never the real issue, neither was revenge. The matter was far deeper. That very afternoon, I sat down with Thomas Baldwin, our ex-head of engineering, at a diner halfway between our residences. The place was nearly deserted at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, only a few truckers at the counter, and us tucked into a back booth. Harold managed to get me a year's severance, Thomas said, stirring his coffee but not drinking it. Not as generous a deal as yours, but still better than... They want you to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Thomas nodded. I cannot discuss proprietary methods or business strategies for 5 years, he said, letting out a bitter laugh. 40 years in engineering, and now I am suddenly forbidden from talking about my own work. When you sign the agreement, you really do not have much choice. He mentioned he had a granddaughter about to start college next year. I slid a business card across the table. Douglas Clean Precision Parts is looking for a consultant, I said. Someone who knows precision hydraulics, no NDA needed. Thomas looked at the card. Harris would sue me if I took this, he replied. Not if you are only advising on general industry standards, nothing confidential, I explained. Slowly he put the card in his pocket. What's going on, Steve? This is not like you stirring things up. I had not told anyone about my deal with Douglas yet, but Thomas deserved to hear it. We had worked shoulder to shoulder for over 10 years. I am partnering with Precision, I admitted softly. Douglas brought me in to lead a new division focused on hydraulic components that are made in small batches and have high profit margins. Vanessa thinks it is a waste of time. Thomas raised his eyebrows. Custom work? Charles always said that was Harris's future, but Vanessa wants to concentrate on mass production. She believes she can compete with foreign manufacturers on price. She is wrong. Thomas said firmly, Not with our labor expenses. I know, Charles knows as well, I added. Thomas leaned in. Is that why you were telling me this? Do you think Charles is involved somehow? I shook my head no, but deep down I had my doubts. I had lunch with Jennifer yesterday and she mentioned Vanessa has been selling off the specialized equipment Charles purchased last year for custom projects. She's already disposed of half the machinery, which amounts to over $2 million in assets. Thomas's eyes widened when he heard the auction prices, guessing they probably received around 30 cents on the dollar. He leaned back, suddenly realizing Vanessa is dismantling the company, converting its assets into cash. I nodded and added, "Guess who has been acquiring property in Miami?" Thomas ran a hand over his face and asked, "Does Charles know about this?" I responded, "I don't think he does. He built that company to leave a legacy, not to liquidate it." We sat quietly for a moment, both absorbing what this meant, not just for us, but also for the more than 100 employees still working at Harris, for Charles's lifelong effort. "What do you plan to do now?" Thomas finally asked. "Build something better," I answered calmly. "Something that honors both the past and the future." When I mentioned Douglas Clean, Thomas sounded doubtful. "Douglas is just an investor who's 2 years away from retirement. He wants to support people who know what they're doing and then step aside." Thomas smirked. "Let me guess, you need an engineer who understands hydraulics." For the first time in weeks, I smiled. "The role is yours if you want it, once your NDA covers actual proprietary information instead of general knowledge." Thomas examined me thoughtfully and said, "This isn't just business for you, is it?" I nodded. "It's personal. It's about principles, about creating something enduring. That's all I have ever wanted." 2 months later, I was sitting in Douglas Klein's office going over the architectural drawings for the new facility. The converted warehouse located on the east side of Indianapolis was going to become the home of Cornerstone Precision, our new business focused on custom hydraulic parts. The name had been Steve's idea. He said it was about building from the corners up, which is how you create something meant to endure. Douglas, a broad-shouldered man with a full white beard and sleeves always rolled up, laid out the supplier contracts on the desk. The machine shops confirmed they could deliver the initial 5 units by next month, and the CNC programmer would start on Monday. Douglas gave me a meaningful glance. "A former Harris employee," he said. "You recommended us." I nodded. Jason Wright had spent 6 years at Harris. He was a genius with computer modeling, but severely underpaid. Vanessa had cut his department's budget by 30% while doubling her own salary. He had quit 2 weeks ago. "How many is that now?" asked Douglas. 7, I answered, "all top performers." Douglas whistled softly. "Harris is losing their best people quickly." I replied, "People follow strong leadership, and Vanessa is not delivering that." My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer, still working in Harris's lab, but secretly sending me updates. With 3 years left until retirement, she could not leave, but was definitely watching everything closely. The message included a snapshot of an internal note mentioning production delays, quality problems, and 3 major clients threatening to cancel contracts due to missed deadlines. I showed it to Douglas. Douglas adjusted his glasses to read more clearly, just as we had anticipated. He said the brain drain was already impacting their output. I slipped my phone into my pocket, feeling no comfort from the news. Harris was employing families I had known for many years. People with mortgages, children in college, parents in nursing care. Their hardship was not my intention. We needed to contact Midwest Manufacturing, I suggested, one of Harris's largest clients. Let them know we would be up and running in 60 days. Douglas gave a nod, already taking notes. A meeting had been set for next week since their purchasing managers were eager to discuss. I stood and walked toward the window, looking out over the warehouse floor below. Workers were assembling the initial equipment, the framework of something fresh, something founded on both respect for experience and innovation. Suddenly, my phone rang. Charles appeared on the screen. I needed to answer. I told Douglas, who acknowledged with a nod and left the room, closing the door behind him. I picked up and said, "Charles?" His voice was weary, almost defeated. "We need to talk." "I'm listening," I replied. He sighed deeply. "I know what you're doing, the new company, hiring away Harris's employees." I remained silent. It was not illegal or even unethical, just business. "I'm not calling to ask you to stop," Charles went on. "I'm calling to ask for your help." That caught me off guard. "What kind of help?" "The kind that might rescue what remains of my company," he said, pausing. "Vanessa has been selling assets, cutting quality. The board is I am worried, and so are you. Why share this with me? Because you are the only person who fully understands every detail of the operation, the only one who might find a way forward. Another moment of silence passed. I should have listened to you months earlier when you warned me she was not prepared. I closed my eyes and reflected on all those years working with Charles, building something we both valued, a venture that employed hundreds who relied on us to make sound choices. What exactly are you proposing, Charles? Come to my house tonight at 7. Bring Thomas if he agrees. The board wants to consider the possibilities. Possibilities, yes. Charles's tone grew firmer, hinting at potential changes in leadership. I glanced once more at the warehouse floor, our modest but expanding enterprise, a future I was trying to build from the ruins of Betrayal. I will be there, I finally replied, though without promises. That's fair, Charles said, his voice filled with relief. And Steve? Yes, I appreciate you still accepting my calls. 6 months after my dismissal, I stood at the back of Harris Machinery's main conference room. The quarterly company-wide meeting was just starting. Vanessa sat at the head of the table, accompanied by her new executive team, all under 35, visibly tense. I was not scheduled to speak until the end. That had been agreed with the board. Let Vanessa present her quarterly figures first. Allow her to explain the 37% decline in revenue, the contracts lost, the drop in quality. She was midway through a presentation, attributing the issues to market trends and outdated operational flaws when she spotted me. What is he doing here? She demanded, pointing directly at me. Charles, seated quietly among the board members, gave a subtle nod to the chairman, who then stood up. Vanessa, the chairman announced, the board has come to a conclusion about the company's leadership. Her face drained of color. You must be joking, Steve, she snapped. The chairman then turned to me. Would you like to explain the new arrangement? I moved forward, clutching the folder Harold Preston had prepared for my severance half a year ago, though the contents were entirely different now. Harris Machinery is merging with Cornerstone Precision, I stated firmly. The board approved the acquisition deal this morning. Vanessa let out a sharp laugh. This is ridiculous. I am the majority shareholder. Charles responded calmly. You only own 20%. I retorted. I hold 51%, which I have now used to support the merger. I pushed the folder toward her. Cornerstone will take over Harper's custom hydraulics division. The remainder will operate under new leadership, my leadership. Thomas appeared in the doorway, intervening. Vanessa nervously flipped through the documents, her hands trembling. This is business, I concluded for her. Nothing personal. A year later, I stood in the expanded manufacturing plant, combining Cornerstone Precision and Harper Custom Hydraulics. Employees moved smoothly between workstations, displaying renewed energy. The continuous hum of machines formed a perfect harmony of productivity I had deeply missed during my time away. Charles joined me on the observation deck, leaning heavily on his cane. Although his health had not shown improvement, his spirit remained unbroken. Seeing the company flourish again seemed to be the finest remedy. The quarterly results arrived, he said, as he handed me a report. It was the best in 5 years. I acknowledged silently, reviewing the data carefully. Profit margins were increasing, employee retention had stabilized, and 3 new patents had been submitted. Vanessa called yesterday, Charles mentioned quietly from Miami. I raised an eyebrow, but did not respond. After the merger, she had taken her settlement and vanished without any farewells or apologies. Now, she was starting a consulting firm. Charles asked if I would invest. Will you? He inquired. Charles declined, insisting that she return to Indianapolis first and learn the business intimately, as he and I had done. Then she had hung up. His smile carried sadness, but she called back this morning, asking if the offer was still valid. Below us, I observed Jason training 2 new programmers on our latest system. Jennifer, dressed in her lab coat, examined components with her usual meticulousness. Thomas sat at a workstation, sketching design changes by hand before digitizing them. Experience and innovation worked hand in hand. They were not opponents, nor did one replace the other. Instead, they combined to create something far more powerful. You know, Charles said, when I included that severance clause in your contract, I never anticipated how things would unfold. I smiled, knowing neither of us had. We remained in a peaceful quiet, observing the business we had both contributed to create steadily expanding. Certain lessons demand a high cost, yet the ones that truly endure are those that transform our perspective on life. Such lessons are inevitably valuable beyond measure,